Imagination. Well, this was an interesting one. I loved what Napoleon Hill did in differentiating two kinds of imagination, synthetic and creative imagination. So let's talk about those in relation to NLP and in relation to probably more appropriately to Huna, which is why I've got the three minds back up on the flip chart again. So I'm just going to move the chair out of the way so I can stand up and talk about this. So firstly, synthetic imagination. This is the imagination that comes from the unconscious mind, which is the imagination which is through a process called synthesis, as in taking already existing ideas, synthesizing or combining those ideas, and creating a new version of those ideas. So, interestingly, I would say that I'm a very, very good synthesizer. I gather up information from lots of very varied fields, put those into my unconscious mind, and then my unconscious mind comes up with is a new way of thinking about that. But it's not creating something totally new like creative intelligence. So synthetic intelligence probably is the one that you're going to use the most. It's the one that's the easiest to use, and it's also the one that, if you think about it, is creating a lot of what appears to be new ideas on the planet today. Elon Musk. People are saying Elon Musk is a genius. Now, Napoleon Hill is saying true genius is creative intelligence, something totally new, which is why I would beg to differ on Elon Musk being a genius. This isn't in any way being disrespectful for him, because I admire him massively on what he's achieving and what he's achieved. But then, look at what he's doing. Electric cars. Well, that's not new. In fact, Nikola Tesla, who I believe was a true creative intelligence genius, demonstrated an electric car 100 years ago, and it ran off water. Now, I wonder why that never took off. So, what Tesla has done is taken existing ideas and combined them to create an electric car. We could look at SpaceX and, his Starlink internet system. Well, the internet already existed. Satellites already existed. Radio transmission to and from satellites already existed. And if you think what we have available to us, then, that's probably around about 10, maybe 20 years behind what's there in military satellites. So he took these things that already existed and rockets, as he improved them. Yes, he has, but the rockets he is using was still created by Jack Parsons, who invented the first rocket-fueled engine, which took man to the moon, and now is taking Tesla's Starlink satellites into low orbit. So he's a great synthesizer, though not necessarily using creative intelligence. NLP is an example of synthesis. Everything in NLP existed before Bandra and Grinder brought it all together and called it NLP. So, and again, this isn't to kind of like put down Bandra and Grinder. I love them. When I came across NLP, it lit my brain up, and I've been excited about NLP for the last 30 years. And it's a synthesis, not a creation. So now let's differentiate that with creative intelligence, which comes from the higher self. So your unconscious mind, intuitions, gut instincts, gut feelings, etc., etc. A higher self, inspiration, where something comes to you and it appears to drop out of nowhere. So people, I believe, were totally into creative intelligence, as Napoleon Hill calls it. And interestingly, Alfred Korzybski, in his book, Science and Sanity, you could say that Alfred Korzybski was the world's first modeler. And he modeled genius, and he particularly modeled Albert Einstein. And interestingly, in Science and Sanity, written in 1935, Alfred Korzybski called this kind of thinking creative intelligence, the same as Napoleon Hill does. And obviously, Alfred Korzybski example was Albert Einstein. Was he a genius? Did he create something completely new? Did he pull a new idea out of the ether? Yes, he did. And, he himself said that he, to a certain extent, he wished he hadn't, because, what he discovered, which was like this infinite source of energy, was then misused with the advent of atomic bombs, nuclear bombs, etc. Nikola Tesla. Would I say that Nikola Tesla was a genius? Yes. Did he pull ideas out of the ether that nobody had thought about before? Yes, he did. And we talked about him before over a couple of the last sessions, where now Nikola Tesla is actually honored as the inventor and the creator of radio, rather than Marconi. Marconi was more of a synthesizer. But here's an interesting thing. Joel Barker, an American futurist, created a number of videos in the late 80s, early 90s around what he called paradigm pioneers, people who busted the paradigm. Nikola Tesla busted the paradigm. Albert Einstein busted the paradigm. When you bust a paradigm, everything changed. And though it was the synthesizers that followed the creative intelligence people that actually made money out of what the people did from busting the paradigm, which is an interesting pattern if you think about it. Plus, Nikola Tesla not only invented radio, but also came up with the idea of how we could create free energy on the planet and transmit it anywhere on the planet for free without wires. I wonder why that didn't go anywhere. There might have been other people at force. So then, how do we use, or how do we develop these two different kinds of intelligence? So synthetic intelligence comes from feeding your unconscious mind with information, with experience. So it comes from reading, it comes from studying, it comes from doing trainings, it comes from watching videos, it comes from listening to audios. And all of this information that you're reading, that you're watching, that you're experiencing, that you're hearing goes into your unconscious mind, and your unconscious mind takes all of this stuff, relates it together, and then will give you a new idea. But it's not a genuinely brand new idea. It's a synthesis of information that already exists. This is why studying, reading, doing master classes, doing trainings, watching videos on YouTube, all of that kind of stuff is so important, because you're feeding your unconscious mind with all this information, and your unconscious mind will then work in the background on connecting all of this stuff, because unconscious minds are really good at connecting what appears to be disconnected information and coming up with a new idea. That's how we go about doing synthetic imagination. Then the important thing, though, is what we talked about in previous sessions: trusting your unconscious mind, going with it. Now, creative intelligence, higher self, there's only one real way of fostering that, of catalyzing that, and it's meditation. Meditation, where what you do in a meditation is you quiet your conscious mind, you quiet your unconscious mind, and when they are totally quiet, then you get what your higher self is coming through with. Also, higher self quite often comes in during dreams, during the dream time, in that your higher self sends you a message to your unconscious mind. Your unconscious mind weaves a dream out of that. And then when you wake up, your conscious mind is aware of the unconscious mind's dream, which is why the unconscious mind is called the dream weaver. But quite often you go like, what was that all about? But then you need to learn a method for decoding or kind of like interpreting your dreams. But these come from higher self. This is inspiration. I think we mentioned it in previous sessions. Inspiration is like, you don't have to work it out. It doesn't come gradually. It comes in a totality immediately. Mozart, a lot of the great composers were all members of magical or occult orders. So, as mentioned before, connection with and communication with higher self was taken as being the great work. It was the ultimate thing that as a human being you could do, is to learn how to communicate and become one with your higher self. All of the composers were in these kind of orders, these kind of mystery schools, and were learning this stuff. And Mozart said that he didn't compose his operas, his concertos. They came to him in one go, like boom, straight out of the ether, if you like, as Napoleon Hill would say, and as Nikola Tesla would say too. And it was just a matter of him writing them down. He didn't have to compose them. He didn't have to make them up. He just needed to translate them into language, which was the language of music. Einstein had his vision or his dream of flying across the universe on a beam of light at the speed of light and noticing how things changed. And then from that experience, he needed to work out a way of actually communicating that experience. And the only language he could find that would communicate that experience was the language of mathematics, which is very much what Alfred Korzybski talks about in Science and Sanity. So this is the differentiation between synthetic intelligence and creative intelligence. Right, let me go and sit down again now. So the next thing that Napoleon Hill talks about, which I think is quite interesting. And a friend of mine did this with me a couple of years ago. And for the email we sent out, I did inflation, because what Napoleon Hill talks about is if you had £1 million, what would you do? So I thought, how much would $1 million actually is what Napoleon Hill mentioned. What would $1 million be today in 2022? And it works out that it'd be around about $15 million today, would be the equivalent of what Napoleon Hill was talking about with $1 million in the 1920s. If you had, therefore, $15 million, £15 million, €15 million, or the equivalent of whatever currency you have, what would you do? And by the way, retire is not a valid answer. So it's more like, what would you create if you got that amount of money? And then, what Napoleon Hill does, and a lot of the stuff he talks about is in allegory, it's in stories because of the time it was written. And he basically says, right, so act as if you got that amount of money and start doing it, start taking action now. Act as if you had that amount of money. And there's a number of stories in that chapter of where people actually did that. See, what they've been doing, and this has been big in the group this week, particularly thanks to my friend Mark Anderson Bevans, has been going. His head's come off on the whole idea of planning, and he's realised that all the goals he achieved. There were the goals that he didn't plan for, and the ones he didn't achieve were the ones that he did plan for. So what Napoleon Hill is talking about here is take action now and act as if you had $15 million. What would you do? And with the previous lessons, what you'll do is it'll work anyway. You'll either attract the money or you'll find a way of actually achieving it without the money. Which is why I put this thing in the email, preparing to do business. I have met so many business people that have set up their own business and they're preparing to do business. I remember one guy, somebody I certified as a trainer of NLP, spent months and months putting together his unique NLP trainings, the manuals, the slides, all of that kind of stuff. And he wanted it all to be perfect before he launched it. He never launched it because it was never perfect. And that's what I call preparing to do business. I know so many people, they've got these business ideas and they want to prepare to do business so that when they launch it, it's perfect. It'll never be perfect. So launch it and then hone it down. When you've got customers, when you've got money coming in, when you get a feedback from real customers, then hone it down to make it more perfect. This is this is something I was thinking about because I've been working on our new online platform, C21 NLP. We're launching it this weekend, and I've been going through it, looking at it, and going, no, I need to work on it more. Need to work on it more. Need to work on it more. And then I just went like, no, I'm not going to mince my words now. I went, no, Shepherd, fucking launch it. It'll never be perfect. So just get it out there, because that is really what taking action is about, is going out there, doing it. And this relates to what I talked about before, difference between magician and wizard. Magician sits in an armchair and they think about this stuff in a completely erudite, intellectual way, but don't do anything with it. Whereas a wizard is out there in the world and they get their hands dirty and they go out and do things. And sometimes it might work, sometimes it might not, sometimes it might backfire, sometimes it might work. But, you know, until you've actually gone out there and done something with it, you actually have no idea whether it's going to work or not. Great idea, but does it actually work? Then the other thing I loved about what Napoleon Hill was talking about, and this is something I work with a lot, is around the goals that you achieve are the goals that you achieve in collaboration with and in alignment with the laws of nature. He talks about this a lot: laws of nature, laws of nature, laws of nature. And you know, one of my students gave me this metaphor. Was he said that NLP and timeline therapy was like gardening. You know, you look out at your garden in the spring and you've got this vision of what your garden's going to look like in the summer, but it doesn't look anything like that. It's overgrown. It's got weeds all over the place, whatever. So you go, okay, well, I've got to get rid of all these weeds. Now, you know, you can go down to B&Q here in the UK, home base, or, you know, I don't know what the US equivalent is. And buy a strimmer, you know, one of those electrical things, and chop the top off all the weeds. But you know that in 2 weeks, they're all going to come back again. So you've got to get down on your hands and knees and take all the weeds out. Now you've got this nice fertile soil. Then you plant your seeds and bulbs. Now, here's the thing with this. Laws of nature, some of those seeds and bulbs may grow, some of them might not. Some of them might grow really fast, some of them might grow really slow. But as a gardener, you don't care, because your goal is that you have this gorgeous garden in the summer. So what you do is you take action. You water and feed your garden, even though it appears that nothing is happening, trusting by the laws of nature that below the surface something is. And when you do that, some of those seeds might not grow, some of those bulbs might not grow. And though you will have a gorgeous garden in the summer because you trusted the laws of nature. And the goals you'll achieve, and I think it's great that Napoleon Hill was talking about this in the 1920s, are the goals that you achieve by trusting in the laws of nature. Yeah. So, yeah, that's my take on imagination. Do we have any questions about any of that?
David, Andy has a couple of questions. Andy,
okay.
If you could unmute, Andy.
Hi there, can you hear me?
Yeah, Andy, yeah, I can hear you, yeah.
I can't get my camera on for some reason.
Don't worry. Now I can't hear you, Andy.
Sorry, and Stuart Wilde said energy was like electricity. It lights up the Vicar's Tea Party and the brothel alike. But is the higher self leading you in the good direction? Otherwise, is good just a concept? And the other question was, is the soul equal to the higher self, equal to the superconsciousness?
Right, great questions, Andy. Yeah, I knew Stuart Wilde well. I don't know if you know that. He's a friend of mine, as well as being one of my my mentors. So at the level of higher self, you know, Stuart says electricity lights up the Vicar's Tea Party and lights up the brothel. Your higher self's a bit the same, really, in that your higher self has evolved to the level where everything's perfect. So the conscious mind concepts and equally unconscious mind concepts of good and bad, right and wrong, just and unjust disappears. So, it is the ultimate source of energy, but it's risen above the level of judgment. So anybody's and everybody's higher self perceives them as being perfect. So, a question I get asked quite often is, so did Hitler not have a higher self? Well, obviously he did. And then, well, how could he do all of these atrocities? Did his higher self believe that was perfect? And his higher self would have done. The other levels, obviously, we have different ideas about that. One of the things I used to love about Stuart was he loved rattling people's cages. So I remember going and doing a seminar with him in Amsterdam, where he said he'd wished he'd been born in Germany, so he could be a member of the SS rather than the British Army, because the SS had significantly nicer uniforms because they were designed by Hugo Boss. I just burst out laughing with that. A lot of people in the room were just, that's atrocious, So then your second question, the source. Your higher self is how you access the source. So the higher self is the creator of your universe, but it draws from your higher self, comes out of the source, which in Huna would be the Keave or the Eo. In Western systems, it would be the ether. In the Indian systems, it would be the Akasha, is the true source, the nothingness. But your higher self is the first emanation out of the source and is your connection with that. And therefore, your higher self can pull whatever that you want out of the source or the Keave. Great questions, Andy. I don't know if that did I answer your question?
Hang on. So what is the soul then? Is that the same as the higher self?
The soul?
Yeah. What describes the soul?
It would depend on which model you had. Freud mentioned the soul, but the way he describes the soul would be your conscious mind. Your higher self is the true you. It's the you that is in every single lifetime. It's timeless, ageless, infinite. That would be your higher self. So it depends on what definition of soul you were using. Like equally, you might have heard of the God within, the God without. So the God within is your higher self, but that's God in your universe, the creator of your universe. But it then also has your own personal connection with the God without, if that makes sense.
Sort of. It's mind blown. You've got more tools than Jesus, David.
I'm not so sure about that, but
thank you anyway.
It's a pleasure, Andy.
Andy, you had one more question. Did you want to ask that one to David also while we have you?
Sorry, yeah, the last question. Where do we go? Where does the consciousness go when we dream?
When we dream, okay. So when we fall asleep, basically our conscious mind disappears. Our unconscious mind doesn't. Neither does our higher self. So it's like our conscious mind leaves the building. It's a bit like when somebody's in deep trance with hypnosis. So there's no difference between deep trance and hypnosis and sleep. The only difference is that in deep trance with hypnosis, the person's unconscious mind is in rapport with the hypnotherapist, whereas in deep trance, the unconscious mind is in rapport with itself. Or equally, if somebody was under anesthetic, as in general anesthetic, so that they're unconscious, or if somebody was knocked unconscious, their conscious mind has left the building for a while. Equally, if somebody's in a coma, their unconscious mind is still there. This is really important things to realize if you're with people that are in those kind of states, is that they are still aware of everything that's going on around them. And they are also in this, what you might call, hypersuggestible state. So what we want to make sure is that we're really comfortable, we're really careful about what we say around them. I was just working with them on one of my students around this with a client of his who'd gone through major surgery. And he said, what can I do? And I said, well, do a recording of positive suggestions. Interestingly, the medical team actually said they loved the idea and they played this recording over and over again during the surgery. But then they had problems bringing her out of the of the anesthesia. So he did another recording to talk to her unconscious mind that it was time to wake up and time to become conscious. And shortly after playing that recording, she started to come round. Yeah, that's what happens is when here's an interesting thing, quite often people say, what's dying like? And the answer, as far as I'm concerned, is it's like when you fall asleep at night, you die, and then you wake up the next morning. It's like, where did the world go when you were asleep? Well, it disappeared. Where did your body go whilst you were asleep? It disappeared. And then in the morning, you woke up and you recreated your body and you recreated the world. It's a shame that what most people do is that they recreate the world the same way as it was the day before they went to sleep. Whereas we actually have the opportunity to create it in a completely new way. Does that answer your question, Andy?
Yeah, thank you. Can I just ask one more? It's a strange one, David, but I noticed in your last room you had some massive crystal eggs. And now I've had a strange experience with crystals myself, especially adventuring with the abundance. And I don't know whether it's watching your videos, but my whole world has changed recently. Job, house, family, the lot, it's gone stratospherically high. And it's kind of too much change, to be honest. But I'm not complaining, but it's I don't know whether it was the crystals, I don't know whether it's my perception, but things have changed, and it kind of went out of my control, like I wasn't doing it. If that makes any sense.
Yeah. So was it the crystals or was it you? Yeah. Do I love crystals? Yep. Do I have them all around my house? Yep, I do. And I don't know what video you saw. It's probably one when I was in my dining room, because I've got my altar in the dining room with all my crystals on it. I'll take a picture of them and put it up in the Real World NLP and Huna group so you can see them. And crystals are alive, is my belief, and they just vibrate at a different frequency, and they can change our frequency too. So when our frequency changes, we create different things in our environment. Cheers, Andy.
All right, David, Roger has a question for you. Roger.
Roger,
Hiya, can you hear me?
I can hear you, Roger.
Good,
Roger.
good. Roger. Well, yeah, you'll be really surprised to hear that planning's doing my head in. So let me try and explain. First of all, let's agree what I'm coming at it from a business point of view for clarity. Let's agree what normally happens is you have a business. It says, right, we need to do something. We'll put a team together and somebody's in charge. They plan it all and then it's coordinated through a plan. And what happens is 99 million times out of whatever, they don't specify the goals properly.
Right, okay.
And the plans then become, in effect, the goals. So the ends to the means, if that makes sense. Now, I know I'm teaching you to suck eggs on this, but let's agree that happens. But let's take it to another extreme, could we? Let's suppose that you're designing the next Eurofighter. Whether that's a good thing or not, it might be a really bad choice there, but let's suppose you're...
I love aeroplanes.
Oh, that's fine. Well, we've got an absolute crystal clear picture of what we want. Let's say we've done our thinking properly. We know exactly what we want to achieve and so on with it. And we've got a team of we've got all the right people in place. Let's suppose we live in fairyland and we've got the right level of resources and all the rest of it. Would you then, you'd still, in my world, you would need a plan in order to, at the very least, coordinate the actions that you needed so that you were those actions were aligned. And at the risk of wittering on, old Napoleon Hill, I read that chapter on imagination, and he does keep going on about you need imagination and then you need a plan of action. So he does talk about plans, and I'm trying to reconcile that with what I do accept is correct. I accept your point. I just consciously, I just can't get it through my subconscious, this business of planning. Have a go at it, would you?
I won't have a go at it. I'll just do it. Yeah, you just talk about planning a lot, but then when you look at what he's saying about planning, it's not actually what we would describe as being planning today. Because, the one example in imagination was the guy who had been sitting there planning for 2 years. And then he basically needed £1 million to make his plan work. And he hadn't got £1 million. So, and then he just went like, okay, so if I had £1 million, what would I do? And he went, well, I'd do this. So he did it. In the story and the allegory, what happened was he was a preacher and he did a sermon, and somebody walked up to him in the pulpit and basically said, come to my office on Monday and I'll give you £1 million. So he achieved his goal by taking action, not by following the plan. So obviously, to take anything from the plane of mind to the physical requires action. So, are you going to build the next Eurofighter on your own? Probably not. Could you? Probably. But what you're going to do is, this goes back to a little bit to like what we were talking about last week with specialized knowledge. What you're going to do is you're going to bring people together with specialized knowledge. You need airframe mechanics. You need avionics. You need all of these kind of specialist teams with specialist knowledge that are going to be taking action. But the thing with it is you don't need a plan to take action. You know, if I'm going to build something, like let's say I'm going to build a radio, then I'll have a circuit diagram, and then I take action to put it into place, but I don't have a plan around it. And you know, when I worked for Reuters in the late 80s, I'm not saying we were building something like the next Eurofighter, but we were building something. Actually, interestingly, we were building something nobody had ever done before, which was to create an intelligent workstation for traders. And, you know, the Reuters Intelligent Workstation was the first intelligent workstation in the trading field. And we did have planning meetings because as software engineers, you have to have a software development plan. And we did it because we had to do it. And then basically we chucked it, we put it in the drawer and brought it out next week. Did we follow the plan? No. Did we create the Reuters Intelligent Workstation? Yeah, we did. Which was probably, you know, I don't know, million lines of code. But we broke it up into, you know, what was needed to make it work. And then we went, okay, you do that, you do that, you do that, you do that. It's a little bit like, you know, the question that Mark Denton Bevans asked in the group, because he's got the same thing, like, I've got to have a plan for everything, but he came to the realization that everything he's planned, he'd never achieved.
Likewise.
And everything he achieved, everything he didn't plan for, he achieved. And you know, so Mark at the moment is a hairdresser, though. You know, you've probably seen it in the group. He says, "I hate hairdressing," but I just use it as an analogy that if somebody wanted a hairdressing to have a hairdressing business and to achieve a particular goal, financial goal with that, then what have you got to do? Well, you've got to advertise, you've got to sell, you've got to do hairdressing, and also do it well, so you create referrals and, you know, repeat business. And that's it. That's the action. You don't need a plan to do that. And then, you know, I said in that post in Real World NLP and Huna community, you don't know which advert's going to work. Mm-hmm. You don't know which sales call is going to work. You don't know which customer is going to refer you to a friend, or which customer might actually be an editor for Vogue and go, I want to feature you in Vogue. Or what, or like is a Instagram influencer and is going to put you on to their million influencers, or will go, I want to buy your hairdressing business. And you know, I've got another friend, not Mark, but another friend of mine, Ian, and that's what happened to him. And interestingly, he sold his hairdressing business out of the blue 1 month before lockdown started. Wow, can you believe that? Well, yeah, I can, because it's true. But you know, he did. So was that in his plan? No. Why wasn't it his plan? Because he didn't have one. And he did have a goal, though, a financial goal, and he achieved it in a way that he couldn't have thought of. So yeah, I mean, we're particularly in the business world, we are indoctrinated about plans. But if we look at all the big, major business goals achieved, really out there business goals achieved, there wasn't a plan because people didn't know how to do it. But they did go, right, this is what I'm going to do. I'll find a way. Whereas normally what happens is, with a plan, people go, okay, this is what we want to achieve. Here's the way. And quite often, you're not really creating something new with that. You are just regurgitating something.
Really helpful. Yeah, no, it does. Taking it to the extreme, which is where you were going with that, you would say, I think you said this last week, be absolutely crystal clear on the why, be absolutely crystal clear and specific on the what and the when, and then make sure you've got enough, you address resources and capacity and all the rest of it, and then the how is the bit that you don't worry about. In other words, you exactly reverse how business is done now. Yeah, that's really helpful. Really,
the how will come.
Yeah, terrific. Thanks, David.
Yeah. Okay. Cheers, Roger.
Thanks, Roger. We have a question from Linda. David.
Okay, Linda.
Hi, David.
On the screen. Yes. How you doing?
I'm fine. This is something I think I've been looking for the whole of my life. You will probably remember from some previous conversations, but I have premonitions, and they do come like a bolt out of the blue. And because when I was younger, I never questioned it, and I get a physical thing where I get this like lightning that goes from the top of my head to down my back to my toes. So I never questioned them, and every single time it happened, I was right, and they were usually life-saving situations. So then I set about trying to understand all this and take it apart and, get to the how to, or how does it happen? And it's obviously got more difficult because I put these pieces in place to find out about it, hence all the training I've done with you and whatever. So it's great, but they're not quite as simple these days. But what I'm wondering is, are these the straight out of higher power, higher consciousness? Where do they sit in the three?
I knew you were going to ask this question.
It's still happening, so I need to know.
So intuitions, gut instincts, etc., are in the unconscious mind.
Okay.
Something that comes like a bolt out of the blue, and as you're describing it, it's like a shock of energy, comes from the top of your head all the way down to the bottom of your feet.
Yep.
And you go, whoa, where did that come from?
Yes.
Is higher self.
That's what I thought. Okay. And yeah, that makes sense.
And, the thing around that is that conscious mind and unconscious mind can and do make mistakes.
Yeah.
They're doing the best with the resources they've got available to them. And, your unconscious mind is going to go, okay, we've been here before. This is what happened. Do this, which in this particular situation might not be the best answer.
Yeah.
Whereas your higher self, being perfect, doesn't make mistakes.
And that's what it's been like. And I didn't question it. I just did it.
Yeah. Yeah. So then, I think I mentioned this in either last session or a few sessions ago. If you ask your higher self a question, which is a closed question, it will always say yes. So, you know, when I was going out and teaching Huna in Hawaii, people go like, I've asked my higher self whether I should move to Hawaii, and it said yes. Well, if you ask your higher self a question and said, should I move to Watford, it will say yes. But that's no offense to Watford, by the way. Perfect. But if you were to ask your higher self a slightly different question, slightly better question, would moving to Hawaii be in alignment with my true personal spiritual purpose and evolution? Then it will go either yes or no.
Mm.
But if you just go, should I move to Hawaii? Yep.
Yeah.
Should I move back to Mansfield? Yep.
Yep. So I think what I'm hearing is, and again, I'm doing that answering my own questions thing, because I never questioned them, they were always right. And I couldn't have preempted what it meant, and I just followed it. I mean, my best example is when I was 14 and I've ridden horses, as you know, since I was 9. So we're at stables, cleaning tack, bright summer afternoon. And I got this bolt out of the blue and it went right the way down my back and it just said, go home now. So I dropped the saddle on the saddle horse and said, right, I've got to go home now. Don't know why, but I'm going to do it. And I ran down to, even though someone was picking us all up at 5, I ran down to the bus stop and funny enough, bus got there just as I did, got off at the other end, ran home because I had the key to the door. And as I got in, my mum had just collapsed and had a massive epileptic fit. And we're talking 10 miles away at least. And she was bouncing off the walls. And when I finally got the ambulance there, they said, that was lucky. 5 more minutes and she would have been dead. That sort of thing.
Yeah, that's higher self.
That now makes complete sense. Great.
So
okay.
Your higher self can't or won't intervene in your conscious or unconscious mind's free will.
Mm.
Unless it's in a situation, a life or death situation.
Yeah. Yeah.
Then it will intervene.
Great.
Either for somebody else or for you.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is why you hear of, like, you know, there's been some natural disaster or there's been some air crash or whatever where lots of people were killed, and then days afterwards you get news reports of, I was meant to be on that plane, I was meant to be there, but my car broke down, I missed the flight, the traffic, you know, whatever. That's intervention from higher self.
Right. That makes complete sense now. Thank you.
That's okay. It's a pleasure. Thanks,
That's
Linda.
why Huna works for me.
Yep.
Okay, David, Stacy.
Stacy. I don't know where Stacy is, or if she is on my screen.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah.
Wave at me, see if I can wave at me so I can see you. Oh yes, okay, I've got you now.
Hi. Yeah, I had a couple of questions. The first one relates to quite a while ago when we were discussing about sometimes when you say something, it happens. And I had a really unusual experience that happened to me probably the week after. It might have been on session 2 or something like that we did to do with Napoleon Hill. And there was this person in this exercise group that I go to on Zoom. We were discussing where she'd been on holiday, and she'd been somewhere where I really, really wanted to go. It was somewhere to see Norway or something on a cruise. And I don't think they saw the Northern Lights or anything like that. But anyway, I said, oh God, I'd really, you know, what cruise was it? Where did you go from? And she said it was Southampton. And about 3 days later, my sat nav wasn't working, and I had to get to a particular place in Devon where I live, and I couldn't get my sat nav to work. Google Maps wouldn't work, and I realized my sat nav was going via France. And I looked at the directions, and the coordinates were just literally coordinates. I hadn't put in the description. It's going to Southampton. It was really weird. And I thought, oh my God, that's to do with what I said, to do with wanting to go on that cruise. And then a couple of days later, I saw an advert for a similar cruise, you know, in a newspaper or magazine or something like that. So that's all sort of like law of attraction stuff, really, isn't it? And I know it's not related to this one, but because I was wanted to ask you something else, I thought I'd run that by you.
No, it is. It is law of attraction. You know, the law of attraction actually comes from Hermetic teachings from a book called the Kybalion by the Three Initiates. And there's 7 laws in there. In fact, on my YouTube channel, I do a video on the Kybalion of each of the 7 lessons, each of the 7 laws. And the law of attraction is one of them. So the law of attraction definitely works, though it works in conjunction with the other 6, rather than it being in isolation. And one of the other laws is the law of action. So yeah, the law of attraction was definitely working, but also the law of action was working because you were in your car driving. If you'd stayed at home thinking about it, you wouldn't have wound up there. Yeah. And you know, that's the way our unconscious minds work, in that we go consciously, I want this, communicate it to our unconscious mind, whether we do it deliberately or not. And then our unconscious mind goes and finds, you know, from the information coming into your unconscious mind, which is a huge amount of information, a match for what you've asked for. Hence, you know, you're drawn to the advert in the newspaper or whatever it may be. Or, you know, you go, I really want a new car. I want this one. And then suddenly you start seeing them everywhere. Were they there before? Yeah, but you just didn't notice them. Whereas as soon as you go to your unconscious mind, I want this, it will start sifting through this massive amount of information that's coming into your unconscious mind and find a match. It's like it matches the pattern.
Yeah, the thing is, I didn't realize how much I wanted it, so it was a good sign.
Well, there's the desire driver as well.
The other thing that I was talking to Linda, it wasn't Linda, sorry, Deborah, about was the fact it was actually back to gardening. So this is a bit like gardening question time on Radio 4, but you know, relating to the law of nature. It wasn't the law of nature, was it? Trusting in nature. Because I've got a new place. I'm recently divorced, and it's like I can actually do what I want now, whereas before, you know, and I didn't have a big garden before either. It's just the way it is. But part of my lawn, I thought I was going to have like wild flowers growing. So it was an area 10 by 10, and I didn't realize how difficult it was to actually get it to work, because the seeds had all been sown, it had been watered, and nothing seemed to be happening. And I went into the garden centre and I spoke to somebody on the till, and I said, if I just see one flower growing, I'll be really happy, because it seemed like everybody I spoke to was saying, oh no, wildflowers, you know, they don't work. I've tried to grow them. No, they don't work. They might work next year, or it's worth holding on. So I thought, oh well, you know, and every time I hang my washing out, so I've got one of those whirligig things, I look on the ground, nothing's happening. And then one day I saw one flower, but it was quite developed. It was quite big, and I realized it was like a daisy. And then I suddenly thought, I wonder if it's anything to do with my dad, the reason that this flower's grown, because my dad passed away just over 2 years ago. So could there be any like connection with that? And if so, would that be the higher self?
Yeah. So when somebody passes away, their conscious mind and unconscious mind dissolve, the energy of that disperses. So they're then just their higher self. And if you looked at you know, a model around reincarnation, then, you know, that higher self then can choose to come back, gets a new conscious mind and unconscious mind. But the, you know, the number of times I've had experiences where people have told me that somebody very, very close to them, you know, a loved one passed away, and they'd asked the person who was passing away to give them a sign that they were okay. And then something happened where they went like, that's it, that's the sign. So yeah, if that's what that means to you, then that's what it means.
But some more flowers are grown now anyway, so bang
right.
goes that theory. But do you believe in things like, because I mean I don't necessarily, but do you believe in things like robins, for example, can be like quite symbolic of that someone who's close to you, you know, is around? Because I've heard of other people saying that, and I know my dad did like birds, and it's not relating to my dad so much, but recently somebody did say something about robins to do with somebody who had passed away, and it was a sign that that person was thinking of them.
Yeah, well, everything's a symbol because your unconscious mind's symbolic. But one of the things I was thinking about when I said that, you know, about somebody passing away and then wanting a sign. One of the things that one of those people experienced was that they went into their bedroom, and there was a little bird in the bedroom, but the windows were closed.
Oh my goodness! Yeah.
And the door was closed, so there was no way that bird could have got in there, but it was in there. And then they opened the window and it flew away.
Wow.
So, you know, the thing to realize is that your unconscious mind is symbolic. It creates and responds to symbols.
It's really interesting. Thank you very much. Thank you.
It's a pleasure.
That's it on the questions that were typed in the chat, David.
Okay, that's good. Fantastic. So I haven't got my book with me actually to know what the next chapter is. I've left it on the dining room table, but we will be doing the next chapter next Wednesday. So thanks for joining us. And obviously the recording of this, I'll get it edited tomorrow. Sally's away at the moment, so she's coming back tomorrow because she's out on as I say, at a family wedding. And so she'll get the repeats out to you, and also the reminder for Think and Grow Rich 6, I believe it is. So thanks for being here. Was this good? Was this useful?
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you.
Great stuff. And I'd like to thank Deborah for standing in for Sally, doing this session, because obviously I can't do these on my own. I mean, it just wouldn't be possible for me to orchestrate the Zoom and also you know, present and speak at the same time. So Deborah, thank you so much for stepping in and saying that you do that. So have a great week, and keep contributing in the real world NLP and Huna group, asking questions, inviting other people in there, whatever it is you think might be interested. Okay. See you guys.